All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is Dr. E. Today's date, October 16th, 2022, and welcome to another edition of Thinking Out Loud. For so long we've been talking about, the power of DNA, right? And how, as much as people try to attribute DNA to man in some way, nothing could be further from the truth. Everything about us as human beings belongs to the Most High. I mean, straight up and down, right? You can't click on a news feed or surf to a channel on TV and not see how DNA done freed somebody that's been locked up for 20 years, or always seen a story where DNA done came out and proved something wrong. One thing about DNA, like I said, you can say what you want out of your ignorance, right? But DNA is infallible. DNA is not only infallible, it's irrefutable. It's like our fingerprints, right? No two people in this world has the same fingerprints. Like, as basic and as simple as that sounds, right? What man could have the kind of insight to think of something like that, right? For all this, science this and science that, we don't even know where we came from. And I say we collectively, because I personally and feel and know that the Most High is the creator of man, right? So let me clear that out the way. I'm a creationist, right? But for all these people like to talk all this trash about science and this and that. Well, for all the science, science couldn't tell you where man came from. I haven't ran up on a science article yet that sounds even believable in terms of not only just where man came, but the universe. You got to remember, this is the same science that said the universe came out of nothing. Right? The universe was formed for nothing. Forget the universal law of cause and effect. Just forget that. We're gonna throw that out the window. All these so-called scientists talking about the universe just kind of showed up one day. I mean, I guess I get it, because to attribute the making of the universe to an entity would be akin to them claiming that or acknowledging rather that there is a God or a higher power. Right, so I guess I get it. But if you're an atheist, you have no belief in nothing. Well, I mean, hey, that's on you. But as for me, I believe in the Most High God of Israel, the Creator of the heavens and the earth, the universe, and everything in between, above and below it. All right, and before I take that back, I'll put more on it. Right, so that's where I stand. Anyway, back to those three powerful letters, DNA. Man, those three letters will make people mad. Man, it can cause people to get in their feelings. And the thing about it is, you can get as mad as you want. It's not about what you want to accept. It's what DNA says about you and who you are, your history, your bloodline. You could have believed something your whole entire life. You could have been fed lies your whole entire life. You could have lived your whole life as a certain race. Take a DNA test only to find out, whoa, not so fast. And on that note, that's a nice segue into the story I'm going to share with y'all, right? This lady's name is Christine Jacobson. And you know how I've always taught that you can't go by looks. Okay, you can't, because look at Miss Jacobson. You look at the picture of her; she looks like a regular white woman, right? But her DNA test says something totally different, and that's why I try to tell y'all: you can't look at someone and tell who's an Israelite. You can't look at someone and tell which bloodline they come from or which nation they come from. Only the DNA in us can tell us that. We can't go by looks. So let's get into the story about Miss Jacobson. I was just, and every time I come up on a story like that, I'm still kind of fascinated by it, right? Because can you imagine this woman right here we're looking at living her whole life as a white lady, You understand? And that her whole life was upended, in a sense, by a DNA test. Let's just get into her story. All right. All right. Now, this white woman searches for her family. It says a home DNA test led Christine Jacobson to grapple with complicated questions about racial identity. And the source for this article is Wall Street Journal, Miss Amy Doxer Marcus. All right, shout out to her. It says Christine Jacobson grew up thinking of herself as white. I mean, she clearly just looks like a regular white woman, right? She was raised by white parents, right? Went to school with white children, pretty much. One day, she took home a DNA test. Miss Jacobson, 67, learned she has West African ancestry, which led her to the discovery that her biological father, a man she never knew, was black. She has been trying to reconcile those facts ever since. Now, let me stop there real quick. I got to throw this in there. So without even knowing anything else about the results of her DNA tests, and this is what I'm trying to tell y'all. I've been trying to tell y'all for years. Her father, and we all know the seed goes through the father, right? Has West African ancestry. So it's a high probability her biological father might be a Hebrew Israelite. Now, if that's true, if her father is E1B1A, or if her father is a Hebrew Israelite, then guess what that would make her, this white woman, right? Because you are what your father is. You see what I'm saying? And this is why I've been telling y'all for as long as I can remember that scripture that tells us, although Israelites are as the sand of the sea, only a remnant will be returned unto God. All right? There's all different shades of Negro. And as we can see with this woman right here, clearly there's a white shade. I mean, she looks like a white woman. There's nothing about her that looks ethnic or like she got a little flavor to her. I mean, nothing, right? But if her father, by chance, being from West Africa somewhere, is a high probability her biological father just might be a Hebrew Israelite, which in turn would make her the same exact thing, a white woman, white-looking woman, a Hebrew Israelite. I had to throw that in there real quick because that's crazy. That's crazy, man. We come in all shades, though. All right. Back to the story. It says her journey has led to both painful and revelatory experiences with new relatives and existing ones, especially her 31-year-old son, Alec Marfisi. He disagrees with Ms. Jacobson's idea that her African ancestry changes her identity from what it has always been, a white woman. I could only imagine. Along the way, Ms. Jacobson acknowledges she has stumbled. She pushed a new relative to take a DNA test and then felt remorseful when it revealed a family secret. She bought an African head wrap and skirt and wore the ensemble to a local cultural event, intending to show affirmation and celebration of her paternal ancestry, she said. She was taken aback when her son and some of her new relatives criticized her choice. Quote, "Race is not biology or genetics. It is your experience in this world," end quote, Mr. Marfisi said, her son. And that's what he told his mom. She has had no experience as someone who was black, end quote. Miss Jacobson said she feels the DNA results matter, not just her life story, which is in fundamental ways was incomplete. Quote, "In my heart, I feel a connection," end quote. The growing popularity of consumer DNA tests has allowed millions of people to trace their ancestry and learn more about your family history. It has also prompted difficult questions about one of the nation's most fraught issues, racial identity. Ms. Jacobson took her first consumer DNA test in 2016. When the test revealed 22% African ancestry, it appeared to confirm a story she was told once when she was 16 years old. See, she grew up in Queens, New York, the only child of parents born in Denmark who immigrated to the United States in 1949. Her mother, Jit Jacobson, was a beautician whose alcoholism eventually prevented her from working. Jack Jacobson, her father, was a sound engineer who worked on the Oscar-winning movie Apocalypse Now, among others. Her parents had other relationships, she said. The couple went out frequently to jazz clubs and nightclubs, making a point to meet the performers after the show. The party often continued back at the Jacobson home. Oh, really? Wow. One afternoon in May of 1968, when she was 16, Miss Jacobson returned home from school and got into an argument with a man she knew was her mother's lover. In the heat of the moment, she recalled, the man blurted out a secret her mother had confided in him. Miss Jacobson's biological father wasn't the man raising her. Her actual father was black. Miss Jacobson's mother, upset, started pacing around the room, but said it was possible. She pulled out a picture tucked inside a book. It was a publicity photo of a man, a dancer. The man was from the Bahamas, her mother said. His name was Paul. Miss Jacobson remembers thinking he had a beautiful smile and a face that felt familiar in a way she found difficult to express. I think this might be your father, her mother said. The incident shocked Miss Jacobson. Later that evening, after her father got back from work, she recounted what happened. Her father dismissed the idea out of hand, telling Miss Jacobson it couldn't possibly be true and that she looked just like his own mother. Really? The next morning, Miss Jacobson went hunting for the photo, but it was gone. She never discussed the subject with either of her parents again. Quote, I love my father. He was the most important person in my life, said Miss Jacobson. I recognize that the only semi-stable person in this whole dynamic was my father, Jack, and I didn't want to lose that. After the 2016 DNA test, Miss Jacobson came to believe her mother had been telling the truth, but she didn't know how to verify the identity of her biological father. Her parents were both dead. The DNA report noted she had relatives who shared common DNA segments, but none close enough to offer clues to her paternity. When she contacted 3 new distant cousins through the testing company site, trying to figure out how they might be related, no one responded, she said. She told her family and close friends about the test results. When she found out her father wasn't her father, her whole life changed, said Angelo Marfisi, Miss Jacobson's husband of 34 years. Based on huge advances in genetic research, many scientists today believe there is hardly any connection between genes and race. Now, I do believe, real quick, that race is a human construct. I really do. I just want to say that real quick. In 2003, scientists from the Human Genome Project announced they had essentially completed mapping of the human genome. The resulting genetic blueprint indicated that humans are 99.9% identical. What do they mean by that? The remainder, scientists said, likely contains clues explaining differences such as skin color or increased risk of certain diseases. Some of those are connected to ancestry, where your predecessors came from thousands of years ago. Race, on the other hand, researchers say today, is a complex combination of factors from physical appearance to family stories and how people are treated as they move through the world. Yeah, exactly. I definitely agree with that. In other words, for many people, it is in large part subjective, not measurable. Right. They treat you by basically what you look like. If you look white, they're going to treat you white. If you look black, they're going to treat you black, and so on and so forth. It's a human construct. Because if you look at Miss Jacobson, nothing about her says black, right? So I'm pretty sure all her life she's gotten treated like a white woman, right? All right, let's continue. After consumer DNA tests took off, customers have found themselves armed with increasingly specific details about their historical relatives. People don't just have European ancestry. It can be broken down into a British or German component, or they may be told their ancestry traces to Congo, not only Africa. The information is based on migration patterns that happened thousands of years ago, through regions and among populations whose names, members, and borders have changed, said Wendy D. Roth, Associate Professor of Sociology at the University of Pennsylvania, who studies the effect of DNA tests on racial and ethnic identity. Quote, "But the test presented as if it determines who you are today," she said. As Ms. Jacobson found out, 3 kinds of results, when they reveal an ancestry that seems at odds with racial identity, can unsettle a life that had been stable for decades. Right. In May of 2018, she decided to take another DNA test. She wanted to learn whether her African ancestry raised her risk of potential health issues. To her surprise, she matched with someone in the company's database who shared enough DNA segments in common with her to likely be a first cousin. Now that's pretty close. First cousin. Ms. Jacobson was thrilled. A first cousin would share her grandparents and might know her father. She sent a note through the testing company's website asking to try to figure out how they were related. She says a woman wrote back asking, quote, "What are the names of your parents?" "I'm not sure of my dad's name," Ms. Jacobson wrote, "but I think he was from the Bahamas." The woman responded that her family was from the Bahamas. Man, I know her heart was just beating, though, at that point, right? Wow. And then she said, "I'm from New York," Ms. Jacobson continued. "My mother told me she had an affair with a dancer who was from the Bahamas. My mom's brother was a dancer from the Bahamas," the woman responded. "So I'm 99% sure your dad was my Uncle Paul." And I'm sure when she heard that name, it was just like, oh, that's the name her mom mentioned, Paul. She said, the woman went on, "Uncle Paul was Paul Mears, or I can't even, I don't know, Paul Mears or Mears. This man," Ms. Jacobson concluded, "must be her biological father." She considered it convincing information, even though it wasn't absolute confirmation. He had died in 1986. Armed only with the name, Ms. Jacobson started piecing together the history of her biological father's family. She reached out to a Bahamian genealogist, Phil Roberts, who had created an extensive Mears family tree. He told her that her grandfather, Preston Paul Mears, was from the Bahamas but left to work in the United States, where he met his wife, Thelma. The couple started dancing together, appearing on stage as Mears and Mears. In the press, they were the Negro Astairs of the 1920s, said Lavinia Deloise Jennings, a professor of 20th century American literature and culture at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. The couple danced at the Cotton Club. But despite their fame, like black performers of that era, when Mears and Mears danced at a club, they had to go somewhere else to get their meals because they didn't have the freedom to rub elbows with the wealthy white patrons who came to the club, said Professor Jennings. Ms. Jacobson found a newspaper clipping stating that the couple had 2 children. Paul K. Mears, who she believes is her biological father, had a daughter, Gloria. The couple divorced in 1930, and Preston Paul Mears went to Europe, where he danced and was photographed with Josephine Baker. He eventually returned to the Bahamas in 1939 and opened up a nightclub in Nassau that drew celebrities, including Elizabeth Taylor. His son, Paul, became a professional dancer too, appearing in clubs in Europe and the United States, including the Cotton Club. He was a stuntman in Bronco Billy, a Clint Eastwood movie, and at the time of his death at age 61, worked as a dancer and musician in a Titusville, Florida restaurant, according to his obituary. Ms. Jacobson spent hours every day researching the Mears family and the Harlem Renaissance. She read books about African American history and took the train from her home in Goshen, New York, into New York City to pore over archival photos of her biological grandparents and father in their dancing costumes, kept in collections at libraries such as the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture and the Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts. Miss Jacobson contacted anyone she could find online who might have known Mr. Mears. She tracked down one of his old friends, and after finding records online for previous marriages, located a former wife. They filled in the personal details she craved. Her father liked to eat a spicy dish of pigeon peas and rice and spoke 5 languages. He played the conga drums, and knew how to tune a piano. He had a temper, but was also charming and a ladies' man. One time, she was told, Mr. Mears got pulled over by the police for driving erratically, and to prove he wasn't drunk, did a headstand on the roof of the car. The police fined him $35 for disorderly conduct. Most of all, Miss Jacobson wanted to meet members of the Mears family. When her parents died, she said she felt like an orphan. Now she found the obituary for Mr. Mears that listed 4 children, who she believed were her half-siblings. One was deceased, and the other 2 she couldn't locate. Another half-sibling, Paula, lived in Queens, New York, around a 2-hour drive from her home. She wanted to meet Paula, but was afraid to go. She didn't know how she might react to her showing up. In August 2018, Miss Jacobson was visiting a friend in Long Island. She learned her half-brother was buried in a cemetery there and decided to visit, bringing sunflowers that she placed on his grave. I wanted to pay my respects, she said, and see if I felt some kind of connection. From the cemetery on a whim, she drove to Paula's home in Queens and knocked on her door. I can relate to that. I did the same thing to my biological father. There was no answer. Disappointed, Miss Jacobson started walking back to her car. Suddenly, she heard a voice coming from a small window in the basement, asking who was outside. She said, "My name is Christine," Miss Jacobson said. She answered, "I'm looking for Paula." She waited a while. The woman climbed the stairs. She said, "I know this is going to sound really weird," Miss Jacobson said when the door opened, "but I did a DNA test and after a few minutes of conversation, the 2 figured out they were likely sisters. Talked about getting lunch and exchanged phone numbers. Miss Jacobson took a selfie of the 2 of them. In a phone call the next day, Miss Jacobson described her research. She says Paula told her that she knew Paul Mears was her father, but he didn't raise her. Paula shared some medical information, Miss Jacobson recalls, and then said something that took her by surprise. She told me I had a good life and a husband and son and shouldn't look for more family because it was going to make me sad, said Miss Jacobson. Wow. In her journal, Miss Jacobson recognized her pursuit inevitably affected other people's lives. My desire to know can clash with your desire to forget, she wrote in one entry. My neediness conflicting with another's fear of connection. My fear of connection conflicting with another's neediness. Paula didn't respond directly to interview requests from the journal, though Miss Jacobson said she didn't want to comment. Soon after, Miss Jacobson's research led her to another possible relative who was also searching for information. Marcia Mears posted on an online genealogical site that said she was hoping to find out more about the family of her father, who was the son of Paul Mears. Miss Jacobson sent a message on Facebook to Ms. Mears and explained that she had taken a DNA test and believed that Paul Mears was her father. "So you're my aunt," Ms. Mears wrote back. Ms. Mears, who was African American, told Ms. Jacobson she met Paul Mears once when she was about 12. He was her grandfather. Paul was excited to meet us. He showed us off. He took us around Brooklyn to meet the family, she said. Almost immediately after connecting, Ms. Jacobson asked Ms. Mears if she would take a DNA test. She wanted to be sure they were related. Ms. Mears agreed. When the DNA test results came back, Ms. Mears learned she had no DNA in common with Ms. Jacobson or any other members of the Mears family she thought were her relatives. Ms. Mears confronted her mother with the DNA results. Her mother brushes them off, saying she knew who Ms. Mears' father was. Then she cried. Ms. Mears' mother died from cancer soon after, so she never got answers about the identity of her biological father. Ms. Jacobson felt guilty that she had broken up a family secret. So let me get this straight. Let's pause. All this time, she finally finds someone who she thinks might be her half sister by her father, Paul Mears, and asks her to take a test to make sure they're related. Only to find out when the lady took the test, Paul was not her biological father. Somebody else was. You see what DNA just did in that situation? That's crazy. That, man, they should make this into a movie some kind of way. That is crazy right there, man. So anyway, let's continue. I had to speak on that real quick. So Ms. Mears didn't see it that way. I know that put Christine in an awkward position, she said. Here she comes into my life and pushes this DNA test on me, and now my world is upside down. That's crazy. I had to reassure her, no, you came into my life and you brought truth. That was by design. That was supposed to happen. Real talk. Hoping to celebrate her newly discovered ancestry, Miss Jacobson bought an African skirt and head wrapped. And headed, what was it say? She bought an African skirt and head wrap and studied YouTube videos to learn how to properly wrap it. In March, when her local Toastmasters club sponsored a cultural awareness evening, she wore the outfit. When she texted a photo of herself to her son, Alec Marfisi, he told her he was upset. Ms. Jacobson argued that African ancestry was part of her heritage, and the clothes were a way of expressing appreciation for and identification with her newfound identity. Their differing viewpoints about the incident remain a point of contention. Yeah, Alec ain't trying to hear that black stuff. Quote, the luxury we have is we can sift through the culture and only take the good, but there is so much else that goes with being black or African that we don't have to participate in, Mr. Marfisi said. And he's exactly right. Can't argue with that. It's not right to take some ownership in culture and not take the whole thing. I agree again. He felt his mother's choice of adornment would be considered insulting to many people. Right. I get that. I get that. My mother wants to get a sense of belonging to something, said Mr. Marfisi, who was her only child. We all need to belong, but that's not the way to do it. That's true. That's true. That's human, the human element of wanting to belong to something. That's so true. He's a wise young man. Miss Jacobson's husband, Angelo Marfisi, said after she got the test results, she was constantly doing research. I feel that, though. I mean, it's like your mind is opened. I mean, you live your whole life thinking one thing or whatever, and it's now all of a sudden you have all this new information about who you really are and where you came from. Yeah, of course, it's going to hit you a certain way. I know it wouldn't. It did me. That's for sure. So it says, let's see, she was doing research. When she tracked down family in the Bahamas, they went to visit. Mr. Marfisi, who was born in Tripoli, Libya. Oh, Libya. Huh. The Libyans are Hamites too now. Huh. Interesting. Always felt he had a large family. During their stay in the Bahamas, he had said he realized Christine has the biggest family. In April, they visited Nassau in the Bahamas, where Miss Jacobson's grandfather operated his nightclub, and many family members still live. She met Antonio Aranja, a cousin with whom she shares great-grandparents, and his extended family. During the visit, Mr. Aranja showed her photos of the Mears that belonged to his mother. Miss Jacobson never discussed her racial identity or asked him about his. Mr. Aranja said, I consider Christine mixed. He said, we are all mixed as well. He said he has white aunts and black uncles and black aunts and white uncles. One of Mr. Aranha's nieces thought she and Miss Jacobson looked so similar. They took a picture cheek to cheek. We consider Christine and Angelo family, Mr. Aranja said. We got together and we had a great time. After Miss Jacobson's visit to Nassau, she went to Florida, where she and her husband own a condominium. Ms. Mears, whose family secret was revealed by the DNA test, lives in Florida, and the two finally met in person. The women sat close together on a sofa, talking after a meal. They discussed the death of Miss Mears' mother and her grief. At one point, Miss Mears tried to reassure Miss Jacobson of their connection, despite the DNA test that showed they weren't related. You are still my aunt, Miss Mears said. You're still my niece, Miss Jacobson replied. Miss Jacobson said her DNA test also turned up new relatives of European ancestry on her mother's side, but she hadn't pursued those relationships the way she had with the Mears family. Miss Mears didn't find that surprising. She knows about white people. She grew up as a white woman. She was more intrigued by the African side of her, said Miss Mears. I could understand that. I could definitely see that. When Miss Jacobson shared the story of wearing the African head wrap and her son's criticism, Miss Mears agreed with the son. Right. You are wearing it because you are fascinated, Miss Mears said. But these are the same things blacks are vilified for. I won't say that. No, not at all. Last year, Miss Jacobson was looking through military records online, trying to learn more about Mr. Mears' service in the Marines from 1943 to 1946, when she noticed he had been demoted from corporal to private. I wondered, is that normal, she said. It bothered me. It kept gnawing at me. Miss Jacobson said she feels shame that she never thought about the black experience until she learned that her biological father was black. She knew racism existed, but didn't consider it a problem relevant to her life. Now she wondered how it had affected her father. She obtained a copy of Mr. Mears' death certificate by filling out a form online stating she was a family member. With the death certificate, she was able to get his discharge records from the National Archives. One afternoon, she wandered into a photo exhibition in Brooklyn that included a photo shot by Marines. She struck up a conversation with a Marine who was there and told him the story of her father's demotion. He asked her where her father served. She told him he had trained during the 1940s at Camp Montford Point in North Carolina. Montford Point had been a segregated training base during World War II before the integration of the U.S. Armed Services. That was a special group of Marines, he responded. When Miss Jacobson got home, she went online to learn more. Congress authorized the Congressional Gold Medal be awarded to the Montford Point Marines in recognition of their service and valor. I wondered if he could be awarded the medal, she said. The head of the New York Metro chapter of the Montford Point Marine Association told her that if she provided documentation such as Mr. Mears' discharge papers, she and her family members could receive his gold medal posthumously at a ceremony in November. Ms. Jacobson never got a clear answer about the demotion. His military record states it came after Mr. Mears was AWOL for an hour. During war, infractions could bring about harsh punishment. In some cases, prejudice also played a role. People brought their prejudices with them into the military. I can vouch for that, but I didn't really go through it. Not like that, not during my time or whatever. Said Master Gunnery Sergeant James Carr, president of the Association of New York Metro Chapter 3. The demotion shouldn't take away from Mr. Mears' service, he added. Mr. Mears was honorably discharged. Amen. Okay, it says, after the ceremony, Miss Jacobson drove Paula home and walked her to the door. Paula didn't ask about keeping the medal, and Miss Jacobson didn't offer to share. I felt the medal was mine, she said. This is part of me reclaiming my identity. Another moment from the same evening stands out. In a video of the event, Miss Jacobson and Paula waited together at the front of the packed room. The women looked overwhelmed, like they might cry. They stood side by side, and as sisters often do, held hands. Wow, man, that is a fascinating story, man. That's like two totally different stories in one. Like, wow. But that's the story of Miss Christine Jacobson, man. That's the power of DNA. I mean, you look at her, I mean, from the outside or whatever, she looks like just a white woman, right? But her DNA outs her as something totally different. Her father, biologically, is black, and he's from the West Africa, so there's a strong chance she might be a Hebrew Israelite, because you are what your father is, remember? That's crazy. That's crazy, I know. But hey, that's what I'm saying. You can't go by looks. You can't go by looks. You can't go by looks. You can't go by how you feel. In order to know for sure, that DNA gonna reveal the truth, whether you want to accept it or not. It is the truth revealer. So on that note, man, I hope y'all enjoyed the story, man. You know, it fascinated me. I liked it. So I hope y'all enjoyed it. So until next time, this is Dr. E signing off, saying Shalawam, elect.